Welcome to the Environmental Transformation Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Grady, and today's guest is Nikos Avlonas. He's the CEO for the Center of Sustainability and Excellence. How are you doing, Nikos? Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sean. Great opportunity to meet you, and thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. No, I think the sustainability is such a big topic in the industry today, so it would be good to kind of cover a lot of this. But Nikos, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in the field of sustainability. And then more importantly, when and why did you start the Center of Sustainability Excellence?
Well, Sean, it's a big story. I'm going to keep it short, of course. It
Okay.
all started back between 2000 and 2004. At that time, I was in Brussels and I was working for a foundation there. And we did the research. We did the research to over 50,000 European business at that time. And what I have identified was in head of the research was that the companies that was taking care of their people and the environment and the local communities had much better financial results than the rest of the companies among the 50,000 companies. So that was make me very curious to find out why is this happening? Why these
Mm-hmm.
companies are better, they're more profitable than the others. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, at that time, we didn't have any terms like CSR, corporate social responsibility, or sustainability like we have today. It was too early. But it seems it was the right time to be in charge of the research. And we created the first European framework for sustainability. And that was the very early beginning back in 2002. Later on, in 2004, we created the CSE, the Center for Sustainability and Excellence, with headquarters in Brussels. And we identified huge opportunities. We believed at that time that sustainability is going to be the future, not only from the integration perspective, but also from the big gap we have in the education of professionals, that they need to know more and understand more how sustainability works and how we can help business to do more.
Mm-hmm.
So we created the first training at that time globally on sustainability, and we started educating sustainability professionals, and in order to help creating leaders for tomorrow, which is today, if you
Yeah,
consider
right.
16 years ago. And create these leaders is very important because, as we know today, we need desperately those leaders for the good of our planet and for the survival of the human beings in the earth.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's true. Well, for the listeners, can you explain the meaning of environmental social governance and why is this such a big deal in the industry today? Because there's a lot of talk about it, and I think there's a little mystery there a bit.
That's a great question. It's the term ESG, environmental social governance, is a new, more or less new term in comparison with the much older term, which was sustainability. And it has to do with the financial sustainability of every business today. So, because sustainability has three components: the environmental, the social, and the governance, ESG is about the financial sustainability of the business. And what it has happened is that the institutional investors, the last 5, 6 years, they spend more investments on areas and companies that they respect the environment, and they do more on the environmental issues than on other older business models like oil or coal or anything like that. And because of these big investors, institutional investors, we had the rise of the ESG. So these investors and also financial institutions, they consider their investments to companies that they meet environmental social governance criteria more profitable and less risky than other investors. And because of that, ESG is becoming a very popular term for publicly listed firms, large firms, that they want to grow. They want to get funding from investors and other financial institutions. And because of that, they have no other choice other but meet this particular criteria.
Well, there's a lot of other components of environmental sustainability with companies. How does corporate social responsibility reporting affect how companies operate in the current global business environment?
Yeah. The corporate social responsibility today, the reporting is considered a must for companies, not only for large or publicly listed companies, but for
Hmm.
any type of company. We have only in North America, according to our CSE research, there are more than 2,000 business every year that they are producing a CSR report.
Hmm.
CSR report is very important because it demonstrates what is the commitment of business towards corporate responsibility. It's a transparent report. And of course, it provides more information to all the different stakeholders like clients, employees, local community members about the what the organization is doing, how the organization is really care about
Hmm.
all of them. So it's a very important component of the value commitment of business today, and it's growing as we speak.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like there's a lot of new positions that are opening up in industry to support these types of activities for companies. Just working through, doing a global social responsibility report for a company. I mean, that seems to me like a pretty significant role in a corporation these days.
Yeah, but Sean, there is also confusion between the terminology. You already mentioned three terms. You mentioned the term ESG, then we mentioned the term sustainability, and also you mentioned the term ESG. So we already are referring to three terms. More or less, the definition of these three terms is exactly the same. So
Hmm.
what we mean CSR is the more or less the same with ESG and the same with sustainability. But sometimes the focus may be different. But there is the terminology, the definition under these terms are more or less today the same thing.
Okay. All right. Well, what's driving the change in corporations' focus on sustainability these days? I mean, it seems like there's a lot of investors kind of weighing in on the executive boards of companies and financially contributing to that whole process and what letting people know their opinion. But what is really driving this for corporations?
Yes, that's a great question, by the way. Today, the drivers are very different than it was 10 years ago. So let me start off what is today the drivers. The most important driver today is meeting legislation requirements. There's heavy legislation already in place and or coming on sustainability.
Hmm.
Second area is that all the consumers, investors especially, they care about climate change, and it's very important. So we want to know what the organizations are doing in terms of reducing further the greenhouse gas emissions. Huge driver. And then there is, of course, a very important correlation between sustainability and financial results. I mean, according to the latest research we did in 2020 on CSE, in 1,500 business, we identified the top leaders in terms of ESG performance, and these leaders have much better performance, financial performance, for over 3 years comparing with anybody else.
Mm.
Which means, and this is not only the only research in the field, there is many other research in the field that they're addressing again and again the same issue, that the more sustainable as a company you are, the better probably you're going to do that in your financial results. But these are some of the drivers today. I believe we're going to see more drivers in the next coming years.
Oh yeah.
And as we know, carbon tax is coming. It's a huge topic. Already, carbon tax is in place in many countries around the globe, but there is already discussion about imposing a global tax on carbon. We're going to see when this is going to happen. Things are
Well,
changing very, very fast. One last thing to say is that the older business model was doing business as usual, and the today business model is doing business in a sustainable way. This is how the companies should operate from now on. Why? Because not only of all these drivers and causes that I mentioned, but because there is no other option as well.
yeah. I mean, right now there's so many companies, making bold claims that they're going to be zero net carbon by 2050, which is it's really unprecedented in the industry for voluntarily companies coming out and saying these making these statements. What's your take on a lot of this activity with companies making these claims? And I guess I look at it as a positive, but I mean, what's your feeling on why a lot of these companies are doing it now?
Yes, of course, for every claim, you need to go more in depth and find out more information about what
Mhm.
are the plans, how we're going to do that. So the first thing is that we need more transparency after their claims. And the sustainability report, as you mentioned, Sean, it's a great tool. I mean, why don't you show in your sustainability report? You're not going to provide every detail, but broader, how you're going to make it, how
Yeah.
you're going to make it happen. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we have seen that some of his statements is cannot be justified, and that's a big issue. We call it greenwashing.
Yeah, I was getting ready to talk about
As a
greenwashing.
part of misleading, right, consumers, the audience, everybody about claims that were not right. But I believe and I suggest that all companies should justify at least how we're going to do it. I mean, it's easy. It's not easy to become net zero, but as soon as you do that, you should provide more clarifications. Why not? I mean, this is going to be a great idea. If you want to be a transparent organization, I think this should be important part of your transparency.
Well, so when we talk about sustainability reporting, you were kind of one of the pioneers in starting or doing this type of work for companies. How has it changed over the years? I mean, back in 2005, what did it look like then compared to now?
Yes, at that time we helped organizations. Actually, the first organization we helped was Lloyd's Banking Group. It's the largest UK bank at that time with over 100,000 employees. And we helped them to produce the first, at that time, sustainability report. And it was one of the first in the globe in their sector. So at that time, there was a lot of commitment from organizations, but they didn't know how to do that. I mean, there was no standards, there was no legislation as it is today, there was nothing. And it was only pure commitment and a lot of enthusiasm from all these professionals. They say, let's do it. Let's show how sustainable organizations are.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
at that time, we created the first ESG scorecard. So what the companies are claiming today, we did create that 16 years ago, exactly 16 years ago, with Lloyd's Banking Group, and we were awarded by the CSR Europe, which was the largest organization by EU, as the best project in among 200 projects all over there. So today, the situation is very different. Today, the companies they need to comply to specific standards. There's at least 10 standards that the organizations may comply if they want to, or if they want to be considered credible in terms of sustainability. Also, there is a lot of legislation. And don't forget that in Europe, it's mandatory to provide sustainability report on an annual basis since 2018. In many places around the globe, in Malaysia, in South Africa, in many different places, it's also a legislation for mandatory disclosing of sustainability information.
Mm-hmm.
So this is extremely different environment. I have to say we're moving from a nice exercise from a commitment perspective to compliance today, more or less.
Mm-hmm. Well, so we talk about some of this requirements for sustainability reporting, and some of the new things that are becoming much more prevalent in society, especially in North America, is SEC filings. I mean, talk a little bit about the requirements now. That's companies who are on the public stock exchange and people like that they have to do it's mandated. They have to report now. I mean, talk about that expectation and is that seems to be another driver in a lot of this conversation.
Right. So last months, there is a strong push by the Biden administration on climate risks. And it was a pleasure to have a collaboration with SDC on the consultation process on a new legislation that they want to implement for all publicly listed firms about climate risk disclosures.
Mm-hmm.
So the Biden administration believes that climate change is happening, as the rest of the world is doing for
Mm-hmm.
years,
Yeah. Yeah.
and which is a good thing. They also believe that some kind of minimum and flexible legislation should be in place. So SEC very soon is going to announce a new legislation that is going to require from business to disclose disclose information about how we're going to manage their climate-related risk in their operations, in the supply chain, and how we're going to be able to avoid disruptions. Don't forget that we had disruptions with COVID, and we still have. But when we're talking about climate change, we're talking about heavy disruptions in the supply chain. So we're talking about the maximum risk possible for any kind of business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that seems to have a lot of weight. This SEC filing expectation with a lot of companies, and they're really starting to focus on that. Who in the industry is kind of advising or supporting companies with this type of activity besides
Yes.
CSE?
Obviously, it's a new market. There are many consulting business that have been entered this market, especially the last 3-4 years, including the big accounting firms, and this is a good thing because there's freedom and from many companies to pick up which one fit more with their needs and their expectations. I believe a lot of consulting business, like the big accounting firms, they show a lot of opportunities. But of course, they enter very recently at the same time. But of course, they are main players and they can help business as CSE do, as many other business do, in order to move on to the next level. And help the leaders mainly because these companies have good connections with the CFOs. CFOs is part of their business, and I believe their role is mainly talk with the CFOs and help them understand that sustainability is not only a separate function within the company. CFOs has also an important role to play.
Yeah, because sustainability practices that you would need to deploy in your operations do have a cost, right? I mean, so CFOs, I
Yeah,
could see why they're going to be involved, right?
exactly.
They're not usually a profit center.
Yep.
Well, what's your vision for sustainability, Nikos? Talk a little bit about what your vision for sustainability is.
Thanks for your question. It's we have a very ambitious vision is to educate 100,000 professionals and C-suite executives until the end of 2025. And of course, change from inside government and private sector companies and be able the big driver of for change.
Hmm.
So far, we are leading the educational space since 2004. We were the first to starting qualifying professionals in the field of sustainability. And we have about qualified 10,000 professionals, but still there is a lot of job to do to reach the level of 10,000 professionals, which is our mission. Um, uh, Sean, just to let you know that it's not surprising today that thousands of new jobs have been created in sustainability
Right. Yeah.
because of everything we have discussed so far and other elements and other topics of sustainability like circular economy, ESG, everything about that. So we need more professionals with specialized skills, up-to-date knowledge, but they're going to be able to lead the change. And CSE was leading the educational piece since now, and hopefully we're going to be able to increase this number and reach the 100,000 numbers, which we want, with the support, of course, of organizations and perhaps some investors that they want to be part of the whole thing.
Well, I was looking on your website and reviewing some of the information you have up there, which is really good. And I also kind of checked on a few other sources about what you guys are doing. And I noticed you guys have a little bit of a partnership with DePaul University to kind of educate or provide some curriculums for recent grads or new grads coming out. Talk a little bit about that and how
Yeah.
you're, raising up young professionals before they even start in the market.
Yeah. So first of all, I we create synergies with many universities. It goes not only DePaul University, University of Texas, it goes Western Washington University, UIC in Chicago, but we help them create curriculums that is going to meet the needs of the market. And as you know, the old-fashioned courses on business ethics and social responsibility are not applicable today in what the market needs. So we needed to update the curriculum. So particularly with DePaul, I helped them in creating the first master degree in sustainable development. But also, with George Nassos, I was the co-author of the book Practical Sustainability Strategies, because there was also a gap in the material for knowledge material for the education. And we
Mm-hmm.
created this book, and it was published back in 2013 for the first time. And it has been now used by several universities, not only in the US, but also in Canada and other places around the globe. Recently, we came out with a new revision of the book because there was a request from the audience. And with all these things, we help to bridge the gap between what the market wants and what the higher education should offer to the market. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a good thing because the millennials, which are the students today, more or less, they love sustainability. They want to work for sustainable companies. They want to have an impact.
Yeah.
And this is a very important opportunity for business and a threat at the same time.
Sure. No, that's great. I mean, just having a recent graduate from university, my daughter just finished her bachelor's in accounting, and I can see a real good correlation here in sustainability with those types of courses. And she mentioned to me that some of her favorite classes and courses she took and for her degree were in sustainability. So that's really great that they're including those types of topics in the curriculum, because
Mhm.
when they get out in the real world, it's going to be something that they're going to have some knowledge about this and a skill set. So that's really good. Well, how important is it to develop measurable KPIs and goals when establishing a sustainability program?
Yeah. Developing smart goals and measurable KPIs is everything in sustainability, because if you cannot measure what is your impact, then you cannot invest money on sustainability. So creating goals, measurable KPIs is the most important thing. But most importantly is use all this stuff in order to shift your existing strategy, business strategy, and make it more sustainable. And today, a lot of business moving and changing from the older business model, as we call it, which is the traditional model of making money, to a more balanced model, which is, yeah, we need to make money. Let's do it in a more balanced way, in a more sustainable way, respecting our employees, society, communities, and of course, do not harm the environment. So this is
Mm-hmm.
it's a new model for business model for several organizations in the globe today. And a lot of business, unfortunately, especially small, medium enterprises, have not realized that. Hopefully, they will in the next coming years.
Well, so what are some of the hallmarks of a defensible sustainability program? I mean, we're talking about developing them. I think each company is going to have their own unique challenges or requirements, but in general, what would be like an overarching, like these are must have type
Yeah,
expectations of a program?
right. Usually is that we need money and resources which we don't have. That's a first right comment. The
Okay.
second one, which is that this is only for large businesses, not for medium size or smaller business. They play a very important role. They should do that. It's not about us if we are a smaller or medium enterprise, which is not the case. Sustainability is for everybody, and everybody
Right.
can gain competitive advantage through sustainability or face unnecessary risks from the lack of sustainability.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned it's not just for the large companies. It can be for any size company. I think too that um, a lot of smaller startups or smaller companies that are really promoting their sustainability activities. That's a competitive advantage. I think a lot of people are buying into. They want to support companies like that, right? So I think it's going to help them generate new revenue.
Yeah, from our experience in smaller business, they need less time, less resources to apply sustainability,
Hmm.
and also, excuse me, apologize.
Hmm.
They can have a big, greater competitive advantage because nobody's expecting from them to do so. But at the
Hmm.
same time, everybody expecting that from the leaders in the industry, from the very large business.
Well, so in recently, we're just days ahead of the COP 26, and the UK made it official. Mandatory climate disclosures will become law for companies and financial institutions. What effect will this have on the industry?
Yeah, first of all, I believe this is a minimum legislation that UK should have. So let's start from there. And it's not going to have any big impact to the any large companies because everybody's expecting that for many years now.
Right.
So
Okay. So it's kind of like,
all large financial institutions have been already prepared. I would say last 3, 4 years at least in order to meet this kind of upcoming legislation. So it's going to play a significant role to medium-sized financial institutions that they're not well prepared to meet this type of legislation. Um,
so it
so
sounds like
this,
there'll be a lot of opportunities for companies to help these medium-sized medium-sized companies,
yeah,
comply with this new mandate.
yeah, exactly. And as you know, we don't use anymore the term climate change. Since 2020, we use the term, we should rename that officially. It has not happened yet as climate crisis because we are right now in the middle of the climate crisis. So officially, I believe we should rename climate change into climate crisis. And
Crisis.
hopefully in Glasgow, we're going to discuss that as well. I mean, we all know, I mean, every citizen understand, right, the impact of climate change today.
You just
No
see,
matter, no
look out.
matter,
Yeah,
no matter if they're not sure where this is coming from, they all understand that the impact is it's huge.
right,
It's about
right.
the lives of the people. It's about disturbing economy. It's about disturbing safety. It's
Your
about
way of life.
way of life. It's about
There's
everything.
so yeah. It's just it's obvious to the common person that it is a real thing. We are in a crisis. How we address it, those are a lot of questions that are still trying to be kind of figured out. Some of these uh, requirements that countries are putting out and making companies comply and report. I think voluntary is really good because we're seeing a lot of voluntary, like stepping up to the plate. We're going to do this. We're going to be carbon neutral by 2050. you know, I still think though, and I've been talking about it on the show here, but being carbon neutral or net carbon by 2050, I mean, is that enough? I mean, shouldn't we be carbon negative? I mean, and try to achieve some of that focus in the short term because of the crisis that we're in.
I don't know. I don't have the answer. It's We need to go and ask the scientists about that. What I know for sure, and I know from intelligence, I have from inside, from several organizations, government organizations, they have this information, is that a climate crisis is accelerating in a way that we cannot necessarily predict. So we may be in a situation a few years from now that we need to modify all the alternative scenarios we have right now. And we're going to
Yeah.
find out that these scenarios are not enough. And probably, much worse things are going to happen. So the whole thing, it's not, and people don't understand that it's not necessarily out under control. So if we reduce the carbon emissions by X%, doesn't mean necessarily that we have a whole situation under control. We
Right.
don't know exactly what needs to be
Yeah.
done. And that's why there are three alternative scenarios, like the low, medium, as you know, high impact scenarios and so on. But I personally believe after 20 years in this field, that these scenarios are going to be upgraded every 2 or 3 years to the worst, not necessarily to the good scenario.
Yeah, it's not going to go down. Yeah. Well, I mean, let's hope it goes down because everyone is starting to really focus on this.
Mhm.
So, what's the role of the investment community? We talked a little bit about this, but what is the role of the investment community that it's had on elevating social awareness of the climate change
Yeah.
concerns and the need for corporations to, report climate risks and sustainability progress more accurately?
Yeah, they play, as I mentioned before, they are a significant driver of change for the firm, for business today. As 2020, according to the Global Sustainable Investment Alliance, the sustainable investments represent the value of $35.3 trillion, which is about a third of all the assets of all around the globe in the biggest markets. I
Mm,
personally believe that the majority of the investments in the next 4 years are going to be sustainable. So we're talking about the 80% or 70% in 3 years from now, we gonna be sustainable investments, which means that if you're gonna be in a coal industry, if you are gonna be in the oil industry, in 3, 4 years from now, you're gonna get investors, of course, but there's gonna be less likely to get the investors that you want to
right.
for your business.
Yeah, I'm
So,
seeing.
so we have a lot of growth on sustainable in investors and investments in total, and this is changing everything.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I've come across a few.
Mhm.
Uh, I guess you'd call them sustainability type investment groups that they're just focusing on investing in sustainable companies and
Right.
driving revenues and profits through those types of 401k or special funds groups that are managed because they want to make a difference in investing in those types of companies. So that's really good. Um, you know, what is what is the key for incorporating sustainability in a company's culture?
Yeah. The most important thing is the appropriate education and awareness that should have the C-suite executives of this company. This is what, from our 20 years experience, we have seen this is everything. So if these guys, they have the right and on time information about what's happening, then more or less they're gonna shift the organization and they're gonna move on the organization culture to a more sustainable one, because these guys are very smart guys. They will understand what's happening. The big risk today is that these guys, they believe they understand what is happening, but in reality they are not. So there is a huge gap in information, appropriate information and understanding of what's happening from this particular level, the C-suite executive level. And
Oh,
if you go behind that, you're going to find more educated people on sustainability than at the C-suite executive level. And this is, unfortunately, this is not a good thing. And we help with our programs. A lot of boards and Fortune 500 firms, which CSE is involved with, invite us to educate the boards and
well,
provide the
yeah.
business case why they
Well,
should
let's.
do more on sustainability. And most of them, after our education and after our programs, we're heavily surprised, and we say, "Oh, we was not aware at all about what's happening, and this is new to us," and so on. But at the end, it's their responsibility to be educated on all these issues. It's part of their job. It's part of their task.
Yeah, it's like it almost ought to be a prerequisite curriculum for the CEOs of companies now to have, some sort of a sustainability credential behind their name nowadays, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about some of the offerings that CSE offers for companies to help develop programs. I mean, you guys are not just a training center, but you're also a consulting arm as well. So, talk a little bit about your company a bit, Nikos, and give us a good understanding of how people can rely on CSE to help them.
Yeah. So first of all, we are very happy all these years to help Fortune 500 firms and leading governmental organizations such as NASA, U.S. Forest Service, U.S. Post Office, and and private business like GM, ABM, PepsiCo, and several others towards their sustainability journey. We have a variety of innovative and tools that you cannot find anywhere else in the market globally. And this is a good thing for being pioneering in this space. I mean, we need to be innovative on a continuous basis because the space is changing. So we offer
Hmm.
them sustainability reporting services with the new standards which are available out there. We help them in creating sustainability strategies and ESG strategy and setting up the right goals and in order to become more competitive and become more sustainable business in the near future. But also we help them to find ways to reduce further the greenhouse gas emissions and become net zero, assuming that the commitment is there and the right plan is there at the same time. So these are some of the services we offer beyond the education. In the education part, we are operating around the globe, as we know, from Asia to Europe, from Middle East to Africa, from North America to South America. So we are a truly global business. We have trained thousands of professionals, and we have on-site programs for certified sustainability professionals, online specialized programs, and programs for board of directors. So we have all different types of specialized programs for offering them their appropriate education and help them move on to the next step on sustainability.
Well, that's great. So, if you're, say, a practicing professional, whether that be a consultant, whether that be someone in charge of environmental health and safety manager of a company, what course would be a good one for them to focus on and maybe take that you guys offer that would help them quickly scale up to the knowledge they need to have and be prepared to start helping and implementing sustainability strategies.
Yes, I would strongly suggest to this person to attend the Certified Sustainability Practitioner course. This is the number one course globally right now. It has been trained, only this course, more than 7,000 practitioners and certified them. And among them are 95% of global Fortune 500 firm and every significant governmental organization. So I would say, yes, go for that. Get qualified, get prepared with what's happening today and what is going to happen in the next 3 years from now. Get all the right tools, all the right knowledge, get prepared, and get started.
Right. No, that sounds good. I mean, that's good advice. I mean, this is going to be one of the driving topics or areas of business and expertise in the industry over the next 5 to 15 years. Really, when you think about it, I mean, everybody trying to achieve these zero net carbon emission goals, developing these programs for companies, implementing strategies. They're going to need people to do this work. So that's really good advice. Well, I'm curious about what role do you see digital technology playing in this space to support companies to track and measure their sustainability programs? And are there any good programs currently out there in the market?
Yeah, significant role as in any other aspect. There is no question about that. Already, the rating agencies that they rate the companies on ESG performance, they use artificial intelligence in order to gather and analyze data about the stability status of every public listed firm. So this is already happening for the last years, and I think As we move on, there's going to be more and more technology out there. I would say blockchain is another driver, because blockchain is going to help organizations to um, do audits in a better way, in a more sustainable way. But also, I believe we need more technologies in the capture of CO2 emissions, as we call it, CO2 emissions capture, CSS, as we call it, and be able to provide renewable energy and storage the renewable energy in a much hundreds of times more efficient way than we are today. So technology is extremely important right now, not only for the sustainability part, but saving our planet, mainly saving our lives, and
Right.
be able to be sustainable. It's crucial, and
Yeah.
we need
No.
it, and we need it as soon as possible. So let me provide some more inside information. There are many companies or states where they declare carbon neutral by 2050, and they say, okay, and we're going to find out what kind of technology is going to be developed at that time in order to make it happen. So they all based in technology that sometimes has not been even there.
Well, like when I'm thinking digital technology, I'm thinking of like software programs to help track, scope one, scope two, scope three type, emission factors. I mean, to me, you got to do it throughout the process of your operations, so that way it's kind of a natural capture
Yeah,
versus, let me go and call down to my manager and ask for a report. And I'd like to see something more of a, kind of a platform related software solution. Is there any out there that you're working with or are familiar with that kind of do a good job of that type of data capture to help manage the sustainability aspects of projects?
absolutely. There are several softwares that they're helping you capture and track their greenhouse gas emissions, for example, or creating a life cycle analysis of products that you are creating, including your supply chain, which is scope free emissions, as you mentioned.
Hmm.
Um, I would say there are many today, more than 100 of them.
Okay. Yeah.
Not everybody, not each one of them are at the same level or meet the same expectations. I don't want to name a particular software comparing to
Yeah.
another,
That.
because it depends really on what the organization is wanting and what are the requirements and so on. There is a lot of stuff out there. You just need to find out if they meet your requirements.
Sure. Sure. Well, there's a lot of activity going on in the coming weeks here in Glasgow. What do you think some of the big takeaways will be from the big summit?
Yeah. So, first of all, the most important takeaway that we all need, the whole planet needs, is a practical plan about the next steps and secure funding for the developing world. Because the developing world is not going to move on unless they go, they get funding from the rich part of the world, from the Western world, as we call it, and be able to move on and do the next steps. Unfortunately, reaching out an agreement is not easy, because you have to deal with politics, not only practical things. It's not about numbers, it's also about politics. I mean, we all know that particular countries, like Saudi in the past or Russia today, they are really are based their economy, whole economy, on natural gas and on oil. So how these guys are going to be convinced to move on away from these kinds of fossil fuels? And this is not easy. I think sometimes the practical part on how you're going to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions is easier than the political part, which is let's all agree what needs to be done and commit on that. At the same time, I believe that they should definitely talk about carbon tax. I don't think there's any other way in move on faster than we should towards the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. Already Europe is going to impose in the next 3 years a carbon tax for all the products that are going to go to, they're
Mm-hmm.
going to be export from US, for example, or Canada to
Mm-hmm.
Europe. And this is going to be a big issue, right? And because also the producers here in the States, they need to reduce further greenhouse gas emissions in order to pay less tax in Europe and so on. So it's a very complex situation right now.
Yeah, no, you're right. It is complex. And I also feel like it seems like there needs to be a bit of, I mean, it's a measured approach too. We just can't cut off fossil fuel right now because, we've got
No.
too much reliance on it. So we need to have a slow phase out, but, and then a more incentivized structure to, scale up the other renewable, sources. I mean, and I think, as long as there's a good balance there, I think, consumers will, jump on board. Industry will jump on board. I think industry and capitalistic type, practices or tendencies will drive a lot of this change. But I do feel like there needs to be also some government, oversight or interaction to help drive some of it, but not to be too bang you over the head either, right? There's got to have a good balance there, I think, as well.
Yeah, but there's some good news as well. I mean, U.S. and China, which are the two largest polluters in the globe, have agreed to move on towards, cutting greenhouse gas emissions. This
Yep.
is good news, and this is good politics for me at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been a really good conversation, Nikos. What do you see your what's your vision for 2030 or 2050 with CSE and its impact?
Yeah. Our vision is to strengthen the leaders of tomorrow so that we can be able to make the change that we just taught in today. We are very confident in all these efforts for the last 14 years. And what is our vision? It's to, again, to reach the 100,000 professionals that are going to be qualified, but also to reach 75 countries, which we are so far. So far, we have been impacted to 75 countries, to go to 100 countries from today, and be able to also do more in-depth research on all these issues and
Mm-hmm.
provide, as we do the last 80 years, more information about what needs to be done, what is the trends, and what are the benefits for especially medium-sized and smaller organizations in the field of sustainability? Because I believe that these sectors, this type of business, are lagging right now, and I think we should push them more through appropriate awareness, through appropriate initiatives in order to do more on sustainability. This is our vision for 2030 on behalf of CSE, although we are very happy with what we have achieved so far.
Oh, that's great. Well, you guys are doing a lot of great work. You're leading the way with education and training and helping companies transform and become more aware of sustainability practices, developing programs. I think it's great. I highly encourage the listeners to check out CSE's website to learn about what kind of things they're offering, especially from the practitioner credentials you can obtain, and also any services support you may need. But we'll put a link to CSE's website on my website for you, the listeners, to check out, and also put a link for Nikos' contact information. Nikos, thanks for joining the show, coming on, and really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much, John. Have a great day.
Okay.